Welcome to Screen With Me with award-winning author D.W. Sauer. The content discussed in this story you're about to hear discusses potentially sensitive topics that include but are not limited to physical and substance abuse, addictions, paranormal and supernatural, extraterrestrial, mythological, and graphic violence that may be triggers to some. The goal of this podcast is to entertain and not cause harm. The author does not intend to undermine the struggles of people who have suffered or been a victim. Please stop listening when any parts of the story become too much. The author copyrights all episodes of Screen With Me and can be purchased in print. All rights reserved to author D.W. Sauer, and no parts of this production may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any forms by any means electronic, mechanical, transcribed, photocopied, screenshot, recorded, sampled, or other forms of reproduction without the written permission of the author, D.W. Sauer. The following story you're about to hear is a work of fiction. Some Screen With Me stories are inspired by local and national folklore. However, the characters and events are fictitious with the exception of verifiable historical events and locations. All incidences, descriptions, dialogue, and opinions are expressed products of the author's imagination and not to be construed as real. The Jersey Devil, Part 3. Jay looked around at the lack of chairs in his office. Are you okay with sitting on the floor? That's fine, but don't blame me if I fall asleep, April answered. Yeah, I think I ate too much, Jamie yawned. You'll be fine, Jay insisted. Now, we've all heard the stories of the devil. Some believe it's a winged creature and others believe it to be a half human and half goat. Carl's account states it had horns and got bigger. I believe Carl, but I don't believe it's demonic. How could a half human and half goat not be demonic? Jamie interrupted. So I think this is a person who's being used as a vessel of sorts, or a deal's been made with one. Like she was in class, Samantha raised her hand and asked, "Why do we call it the devil when it may just be a person?" April pointed to Samantha. That's a great question. Why use the term devil when it's not the devil? We're getting a little off topic, but whatever. I believe it's because of the time and the people. In the late 1600s, we're talking about the height of the Salem witch trials, and if something bad was to happen, then it was the blame of the devil. Much easier to say the devil made them do it than try to find out the real name of the demon. Of course, the majority of those accused who perished or suffered any sort of punishment were innocent of witchcraft. Those who were guilty probably did crimes more so because of their sick and twisted desire instead of possession. Now, all this leads us to the identity of the devil. What? Justin yelled. You know who the devil is? Shh. And yes, Carl said the last place he saw the devil was at Settler's Lot, but Carl couldn't remember where exactly. He said that between the darkness and the fright, he couldn't remember where he was. Since he couldn't remember, I began researching the plots. There had to be a reason why the devil was at Settler's Lot. Samantha raised her hand and said, I thought you said it was due to location. You know, it's secluded. I had to say that on the show. The truth is that I believe he went there because he's got a connection. It's his resting spot, Jamie shouted. Jay snapped his fingers. Exactly. I noted and researched every plot. There are 5 rows at the edge of Settler's Lot reserved for those deemed unworthy. Each row has dozens of graves for those called the damned. The area was used as a cautionary tale after Sunday service. I found several accounts where families would walk in a line, like a parade, to the damned and tell the kids some sort of story of terror. April, following Samantha's lead, raised her hand and asked, You're joking, right? As serious as my belief in the devil. Now, the stories told were different, made up true, or somewhere in between. I never really found an account stating what was told, so I added that part myself. I think it's safe to say that they told whatever they thought that would scare their kids. Jay held up a finger. In their defense, the stories of those buried are pretty brutal. I mean, some are like Wild West file. Jay walked over and grabbed a picture from his desk. He held up a picture of a worn-out tombstone. Former suspect number 10. Tombstone Marker 178. The true name of Marker 178 is unknown, and I dug extensively to try to find it but got nothing. He was considered so wicked that the powers of the time struck his name from all records in hopes his sins would be buried with him. I found one journal entry that said he killed 35, robbed and injured a dozen more, raped an undisclosed amount, burned down the church, kidnapped and sold a dozen kids, was found eating his last victim, and the last of it just said, amongst other atrocities. It was noted that his trial lasted 30 minutes and he was hung almost immediately after. Why isn't he suspect number one? April asked. Because what's happening is personal. Marker 178 died knowing and accepting his guilt, so coming back wouldn't occur in this pattern. Someone like 178 would never leave, and nothing would fill his bloodlust. No, what's happening in Cork only occurs every 30 years and only happens to 7 people between the ages of 12 and 17. Without raising his hand, Justin asked, why every 30 years and why that age range? The first incident of children being taken occurred in 1723 and all between the ages of 12 and 17, and all in the last week of October. Nothing happened again for another 30 years, and then another 30, and so on. So I decided to back up 30 years to October of 1693. The famous witch trials in Salem were over, but you must keep in mind that Cork was a deeply religious county. From the founding in 1674 to 1693, people came to Cork in droves because it became known as a town of truce and the leader of witch trials, convictions, and deaths in the colonies. If one suspected a family member of ill doings but had no proof, then this town would reveal all. You see, it was here where they believed one would become either closer to the faith or to temptation. The only problem was that Cork attracted not just the religious, but also the infamous. Criminals flocked here in hopes of exploiting the situation, and what ensued was chaos that culminated in October of 1693. Finally, we get to the story. Jamie moaned, and his face immediately met April's pillow. I found that there were 3 people hanged on October 31st. Jay grabbed 3 pictures and passed them around. John Agley, Robert Hayes, and George Bagley. George was a real scum of the earth type and guilty to the core. John and Robert were the best of friends and had just finished a late night out at the King's Tavern. They had too much to drink, and John told Robert to sleep it off at his house. Robert lived on the outskirts of the county and was in no shape to ride, so he agreed. So they stumbled into John's house and woke to the most horrific of all screams. John and Robert woke to see bloody bodies all around them, and George Bagley rising to his feet. The only thing John was certain of was that this wasn't his house, and a wound on his head meant that there was some sort of fight. All 3 were arrested, and testimonies from witnesses were quickly given. 7 witnesses in total, who ranged from 12 to 17, claimed that they were drawn to the Maddox house by the spell cast by John, Robert, and George. Each stated they saw them drinking the blood of the Maddox family and chanting in some foreign language. They were given as fair of a trial that someone accused of witchcraft could be given, but the events were somewhat shocking. George told the court, "Go ahead and hang me," and never spoke again. John gave his testimony and stuck to their innocence, but Robert rolled over and admitted everything. One account said that the priest coerced Robert into admitting to the crime to spare his family from further shame, and that admittance would wipe away his sin. John was devastated and held on to his innocence. All 3 were convicted of murder and were declared to be in cahoots with the devil. The hanging was set on October 31st. So it's either John or Robert, right? April asked. I mean, if this account is true about John and Robert going home, then they stumbled into the Maddox house while George was killing the family. Maybe a struggle broke out, and somehow all 3 got knocked unconscious, or they knocked George out and passed out from drinking. Yeah, and George was guilty, so he wouldn't come back. Robert was told his sins would be gone if he confessed, so the pearly gates are waiting for him. John was sure to have felt betrayed and had reasons to come back, Samantha explained. Y'all know how to ruin the flow of a story, but yes, I believe it's John, because not only was he betrayed, but because of what happened to him after the trial. The Maddox family was a pillar of the community, and people wanted the killers to suffer. However, George was ready to die, Robert was considered forgiven, but John was holding tight to his innocence. Every night, the prison guards would take a break, and members of the community would spend hours torturing John. He was flogged, beaten, and the colonial form of waterboarding took place. By the time of his hanging, John was nearly dead, but his last words are as follows: "Today you hang 2 innocent men, but after tonight I will no longer maintain my innocence. I will find a way to come back and take from you what you hold dear." So there we have it. The who. Jay took a bow. And the why, Justin added. But what about the when and why the teen victims? Jamie asked. I think the when has something to do with his age. John was 30 years old when he died, but I believe the teens are for 2 reasons. One is because they lied, and 2 is because children tend to be what parents hold most dear. Samantha raised her hand. Why 7? I couldn't find anything on my own, so I talked to Miss Kelly, the school librarian. Everyone looked at Justin. What? I read. Justin cleared his throat. Why would you go into the library? Where else would you go to find answers? Justin pointed to his phone. Miss Kelly was a senior in high school the last time the devil appeared, and I think I know why the taken were chosen. Thank you for listening to Scream With Me, and stay tuned for the next episode. Until then, you can stay up to date with following me on Instagram at DWSauer or at Polar Press Books. More information, including how to purchase my books, can be found at dwsauer.com or polarpressbooks.com.